Revenge with Karen.
Can someone get us coffee? Derek barked across the room without looking up from his overpriced tablet. He meant me. Of course, he did. I was seated at the corner table like some forgotten potted plant, the quiet assistant with reading glasses and an unassuming blouse. He didn't know my name. Didn't care. He just assumed the woman not speaking must be there to fetch caffeine and smile politely at alpha peacocks swinging PowerPoint decks like swords. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I just sat there, legs crossed, pen unmoving. Let the fool keep guessing. That's been my job for the past 4 years, watching, listening, smiling when appropriate, taking mental notes with the precision of a forensic accountant. They think I'm harmless. They think I'm done. Retired, old guard, a relic from the founding days, graciously allowed to linger like a janitor who knows the Wi-Fi password. That's how Alan likes it. That's how he designed it. Take a step back, Denise, he'd said after my surgery. Let the new blood do the dance while you rest. Right, rest. I built this company with a laptop, a broken marriage, and 2 maxed-out credit cards. But sure, I'll sit quietly and rest while the clowns juggle flaming investor money. Derek strutted in 6 weeks ago like a rooster let loose in a mirror factory, chest puffed, teeth too white, belt buckle shiny enough to deflect shame. Another consultant with a buzzword addiction and a 6-figure retainer. Alan introduced him like he was the second coming of Jobs. He's going to help us scale, Alan beamed. He's cleaned up 24 companies before us. Cleaned up, huh? I checked. 1 of them went bankrupt. 2 were sued for fraudulent reporting. 1 turned into a crypto MLM scam with a podcast. But sure, let's hand him the wheel. They think I'm not watching. But I see it all. Eric's proposal to streamline the legacy footprint didn't go through the board. Alan authorized a reallocation of stock options without a vote. A hiring freeze was implemented, and I only found out when the new receptionist I personally referred was told the position was canceled. Not by HR, by Derek, through Slack. I guess that's how executive decisions get made now, via emoji and vibes. Funny thing about being underestimated, it's like hiding in plain sight. You stop existing in their reality, which means you can move through it like a ghost. The interns talk openly in front of me. I've heard everything from insider gossip to which client accounts Derek wants to quietly sunset to make the books look prettier. The old shareholders are just noise, he said last Tuesday over lunch, holding a forkful of overpriced seaweed salad. We clean the cap table, rebrand, take it public, and poof, none of this founder baggage matters. Poof, huh, cute word, fluffy. Like the look on his face is gonna be when he realizes the baggage holds 60% of the company's equity through a trust he's too lazy to trace. I never sold my shares, never even diluted them. I let them believe I stepped back because I was tired. But no, what I got tired of was watching egos wreck the thing I built from scratch while grinning like they invented sliced bread. I'm done watching, playing checkers on my chessboard, and I just moved my queen. And hey, if you're still listening, first off, bless you. Second, odds are 95% of you aren't subscribed, and my team's been surviving on coffee and corporate betrayals. So if this tale tickled your spine or punched your gut in just the right way, hit that little subscribe button and maybe throw in a like. It helps us way more than you think. All right, back to the storm. The real kicker, Alan, my former mentee, my hand-picked successor, the man who once sent me flowers on Founders Day, has started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. His handshake's gotten softer. He's sweating through meetings. He knows. On some primal level, I think he knows the floor is about to fall out. But Derek's still strutting, still printing color-coded org charts like they're sacred scrolls, still patting Alan on the back like a frat bro on homecoming. He doesn't see it coming, doesn't know that I've already called my lawyer, that I've already begun updating the board, that I'm no longer just watching. I'm counting down. 3 moves left, 2 meetings, 1 summit. Then the silence ends, and I speak. Derek's first official team meeting was like watching a car crash choreographed by a theater major with a marketing degree. He rolled into the conference room in a slim-fit suit that looked like it had been vacuum-sealed onto his body, holding a designer notebook no one ever saw him write in. "Let's disrupt the status quo," he said, clapping his hands like we were at a TED talk instead of a quarterly performance review. He pulled up a slide titled Refactoring the Core Team, as if he'd spent more than 9 minutes learning our org chart. He pointed at names, boxes, arrows, moved entire departments around like Monopoly properties. No context, no history, just colors and acronyms. He turned toward me, standing right next to the whiteboard with that frat boy smirk, and said it. And of course, Alan's longtime assistant will continue helping with meeting logistics and calendar hygiene. Calendar hygiene. The room went still for half a breath, just long enough for every executive present to register the insult and decide whether to react. Alan glanced my way, brief, mechanical, but said nothing. Not a word. Stared at the floor tiles like they were suddenly fascinating. Derek was already moving on, talking about ROI synergies and lean reinvention, probably inventing phrases as he went. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I simply wrote one word on my notepad, witnessed. Humiliation's a strange thing. It doesn't always arrive with yelling or tears. Sometimes it shows up like static in your spine, a faint buzz just under the skin. You feel it in your jaw, locked tight so the scream doesn't slip out. You feel it behind your eyes, where you refuse to let the moisture win. But I've learned over time, rage is a tool, and tools don't work when you're swinging them blind. So I smiled, I nodded. I even jotted something down like a good little assistant. Then I went back to my office, closed the door, turned the blinds, and called Mitchell, my lawyer of 12 years. Activate the contingency binder, I said. Didn't ask which one. He knew. You want me to draft the full resolution, he asked. Yes, the board one, and dig up the founder clause. A pause, then a soft whistle. It's go time. I looked out the window, watching Derek walk across the parking lot with his sunglasses on at dusk. It's almost time, I said, but we're going to let the fish get comfortable in the tank first. The founder clause was buried in a 6-year-old board document. A clause Alan had forgotten all about, because I'd made sure he would. Back then, he was still humble, still hungry. He signed anything I put in front of him, eyes full of trust. One of those things gave me the right to override executive leadership in a crisis, provided I had backing from 2 legacy investors. I already had 3 in my phone favorites. Derek was the match. Alan had doused the floor in gasoline over the past 2 years. And now I was holding the lighter. But first, I needed to know how deep the rot went. Over the next week, I played the role. I brought coffee to 2 meetings. I emailed calendar invites like a good little admin. I even complimented Derek's strategic alignment memo to his face, which he'd clearly had AI write because it included the phrase fungible innovation stacked 3 times. But while I played secretary, I was also playing spy. I pulled access logs. I reviewed Slack threads, started cross-referencing vendor contracts, and found 2 that had been rerouted through shell agencies linked to Derek's college buddy, a guy who sells culture transformation, retreats in the Berkshires. I printed it all, highlighted it, filed it in the folder labeled QIS, Quiet Internal Sabotage. By Thursday, Derek had begun referring to me as Miss Denise in meetings, like I was his aunt handing out lemon cookies instead of the reason this company existed. Alan never corrected him. He changed too. The Alan I mentored would have been mortified. This version, the glossy, brand-polished CEO who practiced his signature for investor letters, was either scared or complicit. Maybe both. That night, I poured a glass of Malbec, opened my laptop, and began composing a letter to the 3 original investors. The subject line was simple: a situation you should be aware of. The attachment was 47 pages long. The last slide said, proposed leadership realignment. I didn't need to warn Derek. He wouldn't see it coming even if I spelled it out in Comic Sans and stapled it to his forehead. Before the glass office and the marble reception desk, before the interns with ring lights and job titles like brand synergy architect. It was just me and a broken air conditioner in a strip mall coworking space. The company, back then, it didn't even have a name that stuck, just a buggy prototype app built by 2 caffeine-addled Stanford dropouts who couldn't balance a checkbook, but swore they'd change the world. They pitched me on a napkin during a networking event. Everyone else walked away after 10 minutes. I stayed for an hour, not because the idea was brilliant, it wasn't. It barely worked, but the problem they wanted to solve, that was real. And I knew if someone older, meaner, and far more stubborn got behind the wheel, could become something, so I wrote a check. Not a big one, just enough to cover server costs, ramen, and their rent for 3 months. They offered me 10% equity. I said I wanted 40%. They laughed. I said, you want the check or not? They handed over the paperwork so fast, I barely finished my wine. 3 years later, one of them had vanished into a polyamorous commune in Oregon. Other was threatening to sell the IP to a competitor because he wanted a Tesla. And me, I was still there, still grinding. still wiring money at 3 a.m. when the back end caught fire and we were 3 days from missing payroll. I quietly bought out the one who disappeared. The second one, I let him sell, but I controlled the buyer. By the time Alan entered the picture, the bones were solid. He had polish, confidence, MBA language, could smile while saying absolutely nothing, which is more useful in fundraising than anyone admits. I made him COO, coached him, protected him from his own ego. When I needed surgery and had to step back, I gave him the reins, but never the keys to the vault. That's when I created the blind trust. 60% of the company's equity, buried behind shell structures and legacy legal documents even the board didn't fully understand. Didn't want my name in headlines. I didn't want another tech matriarch sob story on the cover of Forbes. I wanted control without attention. I wanted the power to disappear, but only until I needed to reappear. Then came the state infrastructure deal. Our competitor had stronger code, a slicker demo, and deeper lobbying connections. But I had something they didn't, patience and a fake name. Margaret Ellis, that was the alias. I filed the paperwork, sent the RFP under an advisory firm I created in Delaware, and made the pitch myself, gray wig, voice modulator, the whole 9 yards. Don't laugh, it worked. The Department of Transportation signed a 3-year contract worth $28 million with Ellis Consulting. A month later, Ellis transferred the service component to us, my company. Clean, legal, untraceable unless you had the clearance to see through the filings. Alan called it a miracle, called it Tuesday. I should have known even then his gratitude had an expiration date. When the money rolled in, so did the vultures. Consultants, advisors, strategic partners who'd never held a wrench or solved a deployment problem, suddenly floating around like they'd always been here. Derek was just the newest in a long line of snakes, but at least his venom came with neon charts and sponsored LinkedIn posts. Now, I was watching them circle the kill, where the body still had a pulse and a knife in hand. I called Mitchell again the following morning. Draft the board resolution, I said. You want to initiate the clause? He asked, already typing. Not yet, I said. Just prepare the packet and add the investor endorsements. I'll get the signatures. And Alan? I looked at the framed photo on my shelf, me and Alan from the early days, grinning like idiots in front of a banner that said we made it. In Comic Sans. Find out with everyone else. It started with a meeting that I was never supposed to know about. No calendar invite, no hallway whispers, not even a slipped agenda item. Just a suspiciously locked conference room and the unmistakable scent of too expensive cologne wafting down the hallway like a warning shot. Derek was inside, of course, holding court like the undercooked Gordon Gekko he thought he was. Alan sat to his right. Few mid-level VPs rounded out the table, people with just enough stock to be dangerous, but not enough memory to be loyal. I wouldn't have known it was happening if it weren't for Jasmine. Jasmine used to be my intern, back when her biggest crisis was figuring out how to politely decline a lunch invite from the creepy marketing director. I taught her how to write emails that sounded like velvet, but cut like razors. She's receptionist now, smart, steady, sharper than most of the execs walking past her desk pretending she doesn't exist. She texted me mid-meeting, 2 words, Derek's purging. I walked past the glass wall like I was heading to the copy room. I didn't slow down, didn't even look, but I counted faces. Took note of who was laughing too loud, who was nodding too fast. Derek had brought printouts, thick, glossy ones with charts. I knew the look. This wasn't a brainstorm. It was an execution plan. I waited until after hours. Then I pulled the janitor's spare badge and let myself in. Jasmine had accidentally left a copy of the packet on the console table by the door. I took it. The title, Operational Realignment, Efficiency Roadmap V1.4. I read it on the floor of my living room with a glass of bourbon and a pencil clenched between my teeth. It wasn't just insulting. It was surgical. Derek had outlined a phased streamlining plan that conveniently eliminated anyone connected to the original funding rounds. Me, legacy board observers, and 3 advisory positions I personally created to keep early values intact. He even included a PR blurb, fresh leadership, future-facing vision. I laughed out loud at that one. Future-facing. The man hadn't faced a real challenge in his life. He just assumed everyone before him was a speed bump. Buried on page 9 was the worst part, a hostile buyout mechanism. Using investor fatigue and reputation management as leverage, he planned to approach the minor shareholders, purchase enough of their scraps to bluff majority influence, and then push through a new stock class that would dilute any dormant controlling interests. Translation, erasing me. Problem was, the interests he assumed were dormant weren't. They were buried, silent, strategically camouflaged. Derek didn't see camouflage. He saw empty chairs and smelled blood. I texted Mitchell. Me, efficiency proposal confirmed. Mitchell, summit, me, 3 weeks. Alan moved it up. Mitchell, you want to play it quiet or loud? I stared at the document's final page, Phase 3, rebrand legacy stakeholders as if we were barnacles to be scraped off the hull before launch. Me, let's start quiet. But bring the big folder. The big folder wasn't a metaphor. It was a real, leather-bound binder, thick as a law school textbook, filled with everything from the original shareholder agreements to forensic accounting logs. It lived in Mitchell's fireproof cabinet and had one rule: only open when war is declared. I wasn't there yet, but the border had been crossed. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early, sat in the kitchen, waited. Derek strolled in eventually, sunglasses hooked on his collar, sipping something green and overpriced. Looked surprised to see me. Early bird, he said, chuckling like a man who'd never been hit in the face with a subpoena. I smiled back, just checking on the coffee filters. His smirk wavered for half a second, then he was gone. But I wasn't smiling when he left. In fact, I didn't smile again for the rest of the day. Not even when Jasmine slipped me another note, this one just one word: summit, date, time, location. The war room had been booked. The invitation sent. What they didn't know was, I'd already rewritten the ending. I invited Alan for coffee the way you'd invite a neighbor over before demolishing their house. Smiling, casual, no need for alarm. He picked the place, of course. Some rooftop patio with glass railings and almond milk everything, where the employees wore lanyards like necklaces, and the chairs were made from recycled gilt. He showed up 10 minutes late, already typing something on his phone, already apologizing with that polished, rehearsed charm he used when spinning layoffs into strategic evolution. Denise, he said, sliding into the seat across from me, still not looking up. I'm glad you reached out. We don't do this enough, just you and me off the clock. I sipped my coffee, burned my tongue a little on purpose. Yeah, just us. He talked first, of course. That's how Alan works. Fill the silence before it starts asking questions. He spoke in the airy language of someone who's forgotten what it's like to build something with their hands. Every sentence was a word cloud: growth mindset, strategic scale, capital velocity. He used the word synergy 3 times before the waitress even brought my toast. And then, somewhere between him explaining our market posture and complimenting Derek's vision clarity, he slipped. You know, he said, stirring his coffee like it owed him money. Once we're public. No one remembers founders anyway. It's all about the team now, the current narrative. He said it like it was nothing, like it was weather, like I hadn't been his narrative for a decade. I watched him for a moment, let it sink. He didn't notice. I nodded, of course. He smiled, relieved. That was the moment he let himself believe I was truly out of the picture. That I was just another legacy voice, a polite nod in the company timeline, be honored in a LinkedIn post and forgotten by Q2. I didn't argue. I didn't ask follow-ups. I just thanked him for the coffee, stood up, and left him there, stirring ashes into overpriced caffeine. Back at my office, I didn't turn on the lights, just sat in the dark for a while. Let the feelings settle, not rage, not even grief. Just a deep, hollow clarity, like finding a key you didn't know was missing. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the summit file. Investor Summit, originally designed as a formality, a champagne-slicked slideshow of inflated numbers and empty promises, was under my jurisdiction. According to the bylaws, which Alan never bothered to reread, the founder's shares came with one overlooked perk: agenda authority. I couldn't cancel the summit, but I could rewrite the script. So I did. I logged into the internal planning portal and quietly revised the schedule, replaced Derek's hour-long vision for Q3 with a single 15-minute block labeled Special Executive Review. I removed 2 consultant-led panels and inserted a board resolution presentation in their place. I added 2 names to the guest list, both early investors, both legally recognized as voting authorities. Then I locked the file with my override key and marked it as final. By the time the administrative assistant opened it the next day to print the handouts, there would be no time to argue, no room to change course. Alan had always been a performer, a good one at that, slick, charming, photogenic in a way that made VC firms salivate. But today, I saw the crack. the chip in the veneer. He was playing CEO in a suit someone else paid for, and I finally realized he wasn't afraid of being betrayed. He was afraid of being irrelevant. And that fear, that was going to be the hook I used to drag him off the stage. The first investor I called was Glenn Mallory. Glenn doesn't do LinkedIn. He doesn't do press. He doesn't do anything unless there's a bottle of rye on the table and your pitch has fewer buzzwords than a highway billboard. Glenn was one of our seed angels, old school, ex-military logistics guy who invested not because he believed in the product, because I did. When we hit our first cash flow panic, he wired $250,000 without blinking and told me, "Don't screw it up or I'll haunt your dreams." He answered on the second ring. "Denise," he grunted. "Someone dying?" "Not yet," I said, "but someone's about to wish they had." 10 minutes later, he was in. The second call was to Lydia Cho. Lydia made her fortune building supply chain software so reliable, Amazon tried to buy her twice. She still drives a 15-year-old Prius and once shut down a $40 merger meeting because the other party used Comic Sans in their pitch deck. She has never once smiled at Alan. When I laid out what Derek was planning, the purge, the rebrand, the hostile dilution, she was quiet for a full minute. Then, "He's trying to erase you. He thinks I'm invisible." "Good," she said. "Let him think that." The third was Robert Klein. Real estate baron, part-time pilot, full-time menace when crossed. He'd only invested because I'd helped him outmaneuver a competitor in a zoning lawsuit. He once told me, "You're not the kind of woman people see coming. That's your weapon." I sent him Derek's proposal. 5 minutes later, he replied with 2 words, "Use me." Within 24 hours, I had their signed statements. Digital, time-stamped, legally binding. Each one pledged full support for any action I deemed necessary to preserve the integrity and continuity of original shareholder interests. Mitchell received the PDFs with a simple subject line: green light. Meanwhile, Derek was busy playing emperor. He started holding alignment lunches with junior execs, handing out branded notebooks like he was launching a startup inside our startup. Someone caught a snippet of his speech in the break room. "We're going to look back on this as the pivot that made the company legendary." Once we clean house, the real money starts flowing. Clean house. Interesting choice of words from a man standing in mine. He also started referring to me, openly now, as Denise the dinosaur. Said it during a Friday happy hour. One of the data analysts messaged me, "He thinks you're dead weight." I replied, "Perfect." He handed out slogans and promises. I stayed quiet, focused, surgical. I pulled every version of our bylaws and cross-checked the clauses. Made sure the founder clause was enforceable under current cap table conditions. Verified quorum rules, voting thresholds, override mechanisms, every detail, no surprises. I also printed the original infrastructure contract, the one I brokered as Margaret Ellis, highlighted the clause that tied our government revenue stream to non-transferable service agreements. If the board changed without disclosure, the contract voided. Derek's rebrand pitch would kill $28 million in annual revenue. I underlined that part in red ink. Then came the folder, the real one, leather-bound, hand-stitched, heavy enough to hurt if you dropped it on a foot. Inside, original founder equity agreements, a trust document linking me to the 60% stake, the board removal clause, signed by Alan 6 years ago, the 3 investor endorsements, financial statements showing the risk of Derek's plan, a notarized resolution to remove Alan as CEO and Derek as strategic advisor, and one last page. A confidential email from a state regulator confirming the infrastructure deal would be audited if Derek's proposed pivot went through. I slipped a paperclip on that one, labeled it nuclear option. I placed the folder in my briefcase, shut the latches, and for the first time in months I smiled, not a polite social smile, not a boardroom grin, a real one, the kind that says, "I'm done watching. I'm done waiting, and now you're mine." The ballroom smelled like money and desperation. Crystalline wine glasses gleamed under chandeliers the size of SUVs. Every chair was monogrammed, every napkin folded into some god-forsaken lotus shape that probably cost a junior associate an ulcer. The floor sparkled with waxed marble, and the walls were lined with tall banners screaming phrases like "Next Horizon" and "Velocity of Innovation." No one in the room knew what those meant. Didn't matter. The visuals slapped. That's all Derek needed. The investor summit had officially begun. Waiters in white gloves floated around with trays of champagne and Ahai tuna bites on seaweed crackers. A jazz quartet played near the bar, just loud enough to distract, not loud enough to offend. There were branded gift bags at every seat, and yes, Derek had included copies of his vision statement printed in thick cardstock with embossed edges. I heard one investor whisper, "Is this a wedding?" Alan was working the crowd, all charm and arm touches. Never guess he'd spent the last month dodging emails from half his board. He moved like a man who still believed his reflection. Every "so glad you made it" was perfectly timed. Every nod rehearsed. But his eyes were searching the room for something, or someone. He avoided mine. Derek, meanwhile, had his own gravity. He floated in with his sleeves rolled up just enough to say I'm casual, but still wore a Rolex that caught every beam of light like it owed him rent. Laughed too loud, grinned too wide, kissed too many cheeks. When he passed my table, he didn't even pause. Just walked right past me like I was air, or maybe he didn't see me at all. Good, that was the point. I sat in the back row. No name card, no folder. Just me, my briefcase, and a glass of sparkling water I didn't touch. Around me, early investors mingled. Glenn was at the far end, dressed like a retired detective on vacation. No tie, eyes like steel traps. Lydia had a tablet in her lap and kept glancing at me without moving her head. Robert showed up last, late as always, sipping a bourbon he probably smuggled in himself. One by one, they found their seats, eyes flicking my way. Just once, just enough. The lights dimmed. Alan took the stage first, all teeth and theater. "Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to share our vision for the next chapter of our journey. A chapter built on excellence, efficiency, transformation." Applause, polite, hollow. Then he introduced Derek. The lights warmed and Derek stepped forward like he was accepting a Grammy. Behind him, the screen flashed an image of a mountaintop with a glowing sun, because apparently success now comes with clip art. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what you're about to hear isn't just a strategy. It's a revolution. A reawakening of what this company can be, leaner, sharper, future-aligned." Counted 6 buzzwords in his first sentence. He spoke in the cadence of a man trying to hypnotize his own ego. Every phrase was a soundbite. Every slide was a flex. He showed graphs with up arrows, words like scalable, ecosystem evolution, stakeholder harmonization. One slide literally read, "Disruption isn't coming. We are the disruption." He paused for effect. No one clapped, but he didn't notice or didn't care. Then came the dagger. Click to a slide titled Legacy Stakeholder Optimization. In 5 bulleted phrases, he outlined a plan to restructure the cap table, streamline passive equity, and future-proof governance. It was coded language, but anyone paying attention knew: purge the founders, cut the original investors, repackage the firm with a prettier face for Wall Street. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not anger, not anymore. Readiness. I looked to the side. Glenn's brow twitched, his version of a smirk. Lydia scrolled her tablet once, then locked it. Robert took a slow sip and raised one eyebrow at me, like a poker player laying down a straight flush. They were ready. Derek didn't see it. He was still up there, drunk on his own pitch, unaware that the stage he stood on was built with my money, my sweat, and my silence, and that I was about to burn it all down from the back row. Because this isn't a story about erasing the past. It's a story about who owns the pen. The cue and a portion of Derek's performance began with handshakes and empty compliments. Investors took turns asking softball questions. How would his plan affect burn rate? What were the anticipated hiring adjustments? How would legacy systems be sunsetted? Derek answered each one like he was auditioning for a tech slot in a city no one visits on purpose. He used his hands a lot, as if gesturing added credibility. Every time someone brought up governance, he pivoted back to streamlining ownership structures and modernizing board oversight. Translation: get rid of the old guard, quietly, cleanly, preferably while they were still clapping. He was on a roll, grinning like a man who thought he'd just won the game before the final whistle. And then it happened. One of the junior VCs, young guy, maybe 30, all gelled hair and debt-fueled confidence, raised his hand and asked, "Be leading implementation of these changes." Derek gestured toward Alan and himself. "Leadership transition will be handled by executive consensus with advisory input." He paused, scanning the room for approval, then tilted his chin toward the back. "And will also rely on some administrative support," he added with a smirk, like Alan's longtime assistant back there. It was a punchline. The room gave a collective shuffle of awkward limbs. Some looked at their shoes. Others glanced at Alan. Alan chuckled, just a little breathy thing like it didn't mean anything, but it meant everything. That sound broke the final thread. I didn't react, not at first. I just rose, slowly, precisely, and picked up my briefcase. My heels didn't click. They thudded. 3 beats across the floor, each one pulling the oxygen out of the room like a vacuum. I reached the double doors and, without breaking stride, turned and closed them behind me. Not a slam, just a deliberate, echoing click. That sound made Derek falter mid-sentence. I kept walking past the consultants, past the VCs, past the executive row with their pale knuckles and parted lips. When I reached the head of the table, I placed the leather folder down with care. I didn't open it. I looked directly at Derek, then at Alan, then at the rest of them. And I said, because I own 60% of the company. You could have heard a heartbeat hiccup. No one moved. No one spoke. Someone dropped a pen. It rolled off the table and kept going all the way to the wall. No one bent to pick it up. Alan turned gray, not pale gray, like his soul had short-circuited and yanked all the pigment with it. His jaw moved, but no sound came out. Derek tried to laugh. Wait, what? I opened the folder. There, in neatly stacked sections, was the truth. The blind trust confirmation, with my name in legal black ink. Founder clause, signed by Alan in 2017. 3 signed letters from early investors endorsing my authority to remove executive leadership. The contract showing that Derek's restructure violated state funding provisions and risked voiding our most profitable agreement. And finally, the board resolution to terminate both Derek's advisory contract and Alan's CEO role, effective immediately. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply looked around the room, calm as still water, and said, "Your presentation ends here." For full 10 seconds after I said it, "Your presentation ends here," there was only silence. The kind that lands like snow in a cemetery, heavy, dense. No one dared breathe loud enough to break it. Then I opened the folder. First, I slid out the document labeled Founder Clause Authorization. Dated, signed, notarized, complete with Alan's youthful signature from back, when he still believed in things like loyalty and backbone. I placed it in the center of the table, like a playing card that ends the game. Then came the majority ownership disclosure. 43 pages showing the chain of custody from the original equity agreements to the blind trust, to the shell entities to me. Line by line, signature by signature. No gaps, no doubts. Not even Alan's lawyers could wriggle through the fine print. I didn't bother looking at Derek. I wanted to see how Alan took it. His face was unreadable for a second. Then the twitch started. Right eyebrow, left nostril, jaw, the slow collapse of a man watching the oxygen drain from a world he thought he ruled. "You, Denise, this. We agreed you were stepping back." I cut him off with the sound of paper hitting wood. "The state contract dependency clause. This," I said, "is the infrastructure deal we won under Ellis Consulting. Page 12, Section 5. Any unapproved restructuring of executive governance voids the contract and triggers immediate audit." I let it hang. No one said a word. One of the consultants was visibly sweating. His pit stains were spreading like ink in a cup of water. Derek, for his part, tried to laugh again. This is dramatic, but you can't just walk in here," and pulled out the final document, Board Resolution 9B Executive Termination Authority. Signed by me, endorsed by Glenn, Lydia, Robert, stamped with the full legal weight of our operating agreement. "You've been nullified, Derek," I said. "As of 10 minutes ago, your contract is terminated. Your access to company systems is revoked. Security will escort you out as soon as this meeting ends." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Just a wheeze and a small, embarrassed choke. Then I turned to Alan. "Effective immediately," I said, "you are relieved of your position as CEO. The board will convene to appoint interim leadership. You may remain in the room, but you will not speak on behalf of this company again." Alan's voice broke as he said my name. "Denise, please. We've built so much together. You can't do this." I looked at him, really looked. The suit, the fake tan, the shell of the man I once mentored. "You did this," I said. "Let him in. You let him take my name off the website. You laughed when he called me your assistant." He started to stand, but Lydia's voice cut through the air like a razor. "Sit down, Alan," he did. I turned back to the room. Every pair of eyes locked on me, some wide, some ashamed, some quietly awed, and then slowly the early investors nodded. No votes, no arguments, just gravity, just truth. Because in that moment, the real ownership, the real leadership, returned. I placed the final page back into the folder, closed it, locked the latches. And as Derek reached for his water with a shaking hand, I looked around the room one last time, directly, steadily. Then I repeated it so there would be no confusion, no memory gaps, no room for spin. Your presentation ends here. And then I sat down. No smile, no smirk. Just the raw, silent power of someone who'd waited long enough to be underestimated, and then reminded the room, who had built the table they were sitting at. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.